This video is brought to you by True Tales of Buried Treasure, the largest collection of old treasure magazines in the West. On our website, you can search for individual treasure stories by region, or buy our original magazines themselves. To pay us a visit, please click on the link in the description. Enjoy. In today's world of serious treasure hunting, the most sought-after prize is often the truth itself. Without uncovering the facts first, it's nearly impossible to find any real treasure. That's why the researcher plays a more critical role than even the metal detector. He's the one who points the way to where the treasure might actually be. Research requires delving into history, translating old documents, studying maps, and applying a good deal of cold, hard reasoning. Some treasure hunters don't think twice about spending six-figure sums on a salvage operation. But being sharp business people, they need solid facts before investing in any expedition. On the other hand, the romantic treasure hunter, as Frank Dobie once described, is truly one of Coronado's children, always looking mas Allah, further on, always dreaming trasmontando, over the next hill. These are the seekers who search for the thrill of the hunt itself. Whether they find treasure or not is secondary. People from across the United States contact me regularly, writing, calling, asking for help researching various treasure legends. Many of these are old tales, but people often believe in them as strongly as they do scripture. They're ready to grab a shovel and head out as soon as I give them a hint of where to dig. For me, treasure hunting means exploring the many versions of these legends and listening to the stories of those who believe in them. And believe me, those conversations are never boring. The questions vary. Sometimes it's a lost mine, a buried stash from a bandit, or even a sunken galleon. The tales are as limitless as the human imagination, and that's where most of them began, long ago. Still, the past 20 years have seen more treasure recovered than at any other time in history, even outpacing famous hauls of the past. Consider Sir William Phipps in the 1600s, who retrieved about 1.5 million pieces of 8 from a wreck at Silver Shoals. That was the biggest recovery of its time, until the golden galleons were salvaged off the Florida coast in the 1960s and the silver ones off Padre Island, Texas. Proper research can lead to treasure. One of the Southwest's most enduring legends is known by several names: the Davis Mountain Treasure, the Loot of Monterry, or the Skeleton Canyon Treasure. In Coronado's Children, J. Frank Dobie calls the story Los Muertos no hablan, the dead do not talk. It also appears in Walter Noble Burns' Tombstone under the Skeleton Canyon name, and in works by Billy Breckenridge and Lorenzo W. Walters. Despite the different titles, they're clearly the same tale, involving real people, though the details shift with each telling. At least one robbery from the story is historically documented. But from there, the trail becomes tangled. At the center of it all is a man named Bill Cole, who lived in Valentine, Texas, along the Southern Pacific Railroad, roughly halfway between Fort Davis and Van Horn. Cole spent his life chasing this treasure while also running a pool hall. His search led him from West Texas to the Pacific Coast, to Tombstone, Arizona, and even deep into Mexico. Though we don't have Cole's personal notes, accounts from Frank Dobie and local Fort Davis historian Barry Scobie align pretty closely. According to the legend, a group led by Jim Hughes and a man called Red Curly, also known as Curly Bill or Sandy King, spearheaded the adventure. Other versions add names like Milt Hicks, Jack McKenzie, Zwing Hunt, Billy Grounds, and Doc Neal. Some later versions even bring in the infamous Ike and Billy Clanton. For reasons unclear, this Tombstone gang planned a major raid into Mexico, targeting the city of Monterrey. They joined forces with the Estrada gang, a ruthless band that had long terrorized the Big Bend and Davis Mountain areas. To pull off their heist, they needed supplies and strong pack animals. They set their sights on a herd of mules from the 10th Cavalry, a black regiment stationed at Fort Davis. A detachment of 99 black soldiers and a white lieutenant was ambushed near Lobo Station, close to Van Horn. According to one of Barry Scobie's sources, there's physical evidence of a battle there. Hundreds of old Army rifle shells scattered across the nearby hills. The soldiers had been cutting hay and had brought a herd of sturdy mules to haul it back to the fort. the raiders attacked and killed all but one of the soldiers, taking the specially selected mules, strong and built for endurance, for their own purposes. Armed with army rations and stolen munitions, the gang loaded their captured mules with bat guano collected from caves in the Big Bend region. They hauled the guano to Monterey, allegedly selling it for $100 a ton. With the proceeds, they purchased enough tequila and mezcal to intoxicate Monterrey's sentries so thoroughly that the gang pulled off a heist unmatched in the annals of outlaw history. One by one, the city's guards and police were lured away from their posts with drink. Once sufficiently incapacitated, they were picked off. Then, in a stunning series of raids, the gang looted Monterrey's mint, smelter, cathedral, and bank. Reports claimed the outlaws seized some $3 million in contraband, loading 25 mules with the spoils before fleeing under fire through the rugged terrain of northern Mexico. The flight back was a brutal, running battle. Pursued by the rurales of Porfirio Diaz, the gang never once unloaded the mules as they pressed northward, all the way to El Muerto Springs, somewhere near Valentine, Texas, or the Davis Mountains. There they buried the treasure. Bill Cole, obsessed with the tale, uncovered numerous details suggesting the loot was hidden in a shaft over 90 feet deep. Legend has it that the miners forced to dig the pit were executed afterward to ensure silence, lending truth to the title, Los Muertos no hablan, The Dead Do Not Talk, as chronicled by Frank Dobie. Walter Noble Burns, in his account of the Skeleton Canyon treasure, expands the tale. He includes a second haul from a follow-up raid during the Monterey escape, this time on Matamoros, over 200 miles to the east. From these raids, the gang was said to have stolen golden statues of the Virgin Mary and diamonds plucked from other religious icons. One version claims the jewels filled a cigar box. Despite the shifting details, most accounts agree on one key fact: 25 heavily laden mules escaped Monterey under fire. After burying their plunder, the gang reportedly returned to Tombstone, where they continued their outlaw lifestyle, this time targeting Mexican smugglers moving through Arizona's San Simon Valley and New Mexico's Animas Valley. Some of their crimes are chronicled in the Tombstone Epitaph and the Tombstone Nugget, rival newspapers from the era of the Earp-Clanton feud. In one infamous ambush in the Peloncillo Mountains, east of the San Simon Valley between Apache, Arizona and Rodeo, New Mexico, the outlaws attacked a smuggler caravan so violently that the canyon earned the name Skeleton. According to some versions, they added 39 gold bars and $90,000 in Loeb dollars to the Monterey treasure, burying it either in Skeleton Canyon or transporting it by wagon all the way back to the Davis Mountains. To this day, Skeleton Canyon is said to hold the bones of the Mexican smugglers and their animals. People still occasionally stumble upon those mysterious silver dobe dollars, lost when the mules carrying them were overtaken and killed. There is little doubt that these outlaws were real and committed many of the crimes described, but the exact amounts, dates, and places remain elusive. It's also important to remember, even if the soldiers and police of Monterey had been neutralized, the gang would have faced an even bigger obstacle: the citizens themselves. In Mexico, both then and now, residences and public buildings are constructed like fortresses. Thick stone walls, 8-inch iron-bound doors, and a deep cultural reluctance to open those doors to strangers make any forced entry a major challenge. People in those days had little trust in official authorities and relied on themselves for protection. At the time of this alleged heist, Mexico had been steeped in political turmoil for 60 years. The so-called Peace of Don Porfirio, referring to President Porfirio Diaz, had not yet fully taken hold. Any attempt to loot a city would have required far more than a few drunken guards. The idea that a ragtag gang could simply roll into a fortified city and plunder it with ease stretches credibility. Take, for example, the claim that they looted a solid gold statue of the Virgin from Monterrey's cathedral, or possibly from Matamoros as well. This too doesn't hold up under scrutiny. There has never been a solid gold statue of the Virgin Mary anywhere in Mexico, not even in the country's holiest shrine, the Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico City. Many church statues were designed to appear golden, but they were actually wooden carvings decorated with estofado, a thin layer of gold leaf applied over a gesso base. Popular during the Baroque period of the 17th and 18th centuries, these statues were artistically stunning, but practically worthless as metal. The gold was barely 1/1000th of an inch thick. The tale of a gold statue, while colorful, is pure myth. And what about the claim that they robbed the mint in Monterey? That's another fiction. Of all the official mints ever established in the Republic of Mexico, and there were quite a few, Monterey was never among them. No coins were ever struck there aside from a few copper tokens known as jolas, minted with special permission by local bankers. Even small towns like San Antonio had these during the Mexican period. If the Tombstone gang really wanted to target a mint, there were better options much closer to home, like the mints at Alamos and Hermosillo in Sonora, or the one in Chihuahua City, all within 400 miles of Tombstone and much easier to reach than Monterey's 800-mile trek across some of the most difficult terrain in northern Mexico. In short, you can't loot a mint that never existed. Then there's the question of the smelter. Was there one in Monterey? Highly doubtful. At the time of the alleged events, there was no significant silver production in the Monterey area, and certainly no gold. The nearest major mine was Real de Catorce, over 200 miles to the southwest. It did produce a small quantity of coins in the 1860s, but those are some of the rarest in all of Mexican numismatics. While there were mines and smelters farther south, especially near Saltillo, Monterey itself had no smelter until the railroad reached the city, long after the time this story supposedly took place. Once again, the tale collapses under historical scrutiny. And finally, there's the matter of the escape route. Of all the rugged, unforgiving regions of Mexico, the one described in this story is among the most inhospitable. Even today, there are no proper roads through parts of this country, and water and forage are incredibly scarce. The idea that a band of outlaws could drive 25 fully loaded mules, plus their own mounts, over 300 miles of high desert and mountains without stopping, and without reliable water sources while under fire, is nearly impossible. As someone who personally performed the first ground reconnaissance of the Big Bend region for the Texas Parks Commission, I can attest to just how scarce water is there. And on the Mexican side of the border, it's even worse. As recently as 20 years ago, mail for the village of Boquillas in Coahuila had to be routed through Eagle Pass, Del Rio, and Marathon, Texas, before being ferried across the river to the Mexican customs house. That's how remote and inaccessible this area remains, even in modern times. The events of our treasure tale were said to have occurred some 70 years before any modern investigation. And if there's one rule all treasure hunters should remember, it's this: start with the map. One glance at a geological map of northern Mexico reveals how improbable the alleged escape route truly was. It's as treacherous as the Jornada del Muerto, or even Death Valley. The terrain alone makes the story suspect. Would the gang really have returned to the Davis Mountains after allegedly killing nearly 100 soldiers? Unlikely. A mule train of that size would have been visible from miles away, especially in that open country. Keep in mind, El Muerto Springs, where the treasure was supposedly buried, lay directly along the heavily trafficked road between San Antonio and El Paso. During that time, the Southern Pacific Railroad was rapidly expanding from both ends, and military patrols from Fort Davis frequently scouted the area, particularly to guard against Indian raids. Waterholes like El Muerto Springs were critical and closely monitored. If Army mules had truly gone missing and left a trail across that country, it would have triggered an immediate and serious response. So much for the Texas angle. Now let's turn to Arizona and Skeleton Canyon. Skeleton Canyon is a rugged draw on the western slope of the Pelanchillo Mountains, east of Apache, Arizona, and about halfway to Animas, New Mexico. In that era, Mexican traders and smugglers often traveled through these borderlands, where national boundaries were vague and poorly enforced. Trade routes like the one from Chihuahua to San Antonio were frequented by armed convoys that functioned almost like mobile militias, strong enough to defend themselves from bandits or hostile tribes. Escorting $250,000 worth of goods would have required over 100 well-armed men. No such large-scale commerce passed through the Arizona-New Mexico borderlands. There simply wasn't a trade route of that magnitude in this region. Tombstone, for example, existed because of nearby mining operations, and it was a place where money was spent, not made or transported. Though lawless activity flourished in the surrounding wilderness, Tombstone itself was surprisingly well protected. While old newspaper accounts from the Tombstone epitaph mention robberies and violent encounters, no source confirms a $90,000 payday or the theft of 39 gold bars in Skeleton Canyon. 40 years ago, author Walter Noble Burns heard a more plausible version from an old-timer who claimed to have heard the tale firsthand from Jim Hughes, the admitted leader of the ambush. According to him, the loot was only about $4,000, 1,400 in silver pesos and the rest in bulk gold. The gang spent every cent in a wild spree across Tombstone and Galeyville. That man named the participants: Hughes, Milt Hicks, Jack McKenzie, Ike and Billy Clanton, and one unnamed associate. He insisted that Zwing Hunt and Billy Grounds were never within 50 miles of the fight, and certainly never in Mexico. As he put it, if this gang had been capable of pulling off a grand raid in Monterey, they wouldn't have bumbled so badly when they tried to rob a stamp mill and smelter in Charleston, Arizona. His story feels far more credible. After all, $90,000 in silver alone would weigh more than 5,000 pounds, a logistical nightmare requiring a large number of pack animals. It's far more believable that the big treasure was no more than a modest heist inflated by years of storytelling. So how did Texas get tangled up in the Tombstone tale? Some versions say the loot was buried at Davis's Mountain, named, supposedly, for a man named Davis who was killed and buried there. That vague detail was enough for Bill Cole to connect the story to the Davis Mountains, near his home in Valentine, Texas, not far from El Muerto Springs. Cole claimed to have found a waybill referencing the treasure. He dug a shaft in his own backyard, 85 feet deep, supported by a tripod of poles, and insisted he had nearly hauled up a treasure chest before the ring broke off the lid. He showed that ring to local historian Barry Scobie, saying it had been too heavy for him to lift, and besides, the government would just take it in taxes. Whether true or not, he at least had the rusty ring to show for it. That many still believed in Cole's legend is evident. About 3 years ago, a group of college students showed up in Valentine to reopen his old shaft. They lowered a gasoline engine into the hole to power machinery, but didn't realize the danger of carbon monoxide. Tragically, one student was overcome and died in the shaft. His companion had to run for help in Valentine, but it was too late. If only they had researched the story more carefully or understood basic safety precautions, they might not have been there at all. Romantic treasure hunters seek adventure, but as Admiral Richard Byrd once said, the man who survives a dangerous escape is usually the one who is well prepared. The fool never is. Barry Scobie, who wrote the definitive history of the Fort Davis area, in 2 now out-of-print editions, knew the land and the lore better than anyone. He also knew Bill Cole personally, likely even more intimately than Frank Dobie, who gave the most vivid account of the legend. Unlike Dobie, however, Scobie wasn't swept away by romantic notions. In a letter responding to my geographic questions, Scobie ended with a simple, grounded truth. Ford, there just ain't no buried treasure hereabouts. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to read the original article or purchase the magazine from which it was taken, please check out our website, truetalesofburiedtreasure.com.